Can you take a digital delay and change it into an analog delay? Well, not really, but I'm going to give it a good go. Hello people, Joe from Hello Sailor Effects here. Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Boss DD-3. In today's video I'm going to be showing you a modification by the man, none other than Mr. Brian Wampler.
We love you, Brian.
Oh, come on Joe, stop being a fanboy. Anyway, in today's video you're going to see a step-by-step guide on how I add a switch to my DD-3 to ensure that it goes from digital sounding to analog sounding. And of course I'm going to be using huge, massive vintage and mojo components. So if that offends you, please write it in the comments and then move to the next video. However, if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, please like and share and come along for the ride while I show you how to perform this modification. Cheers! As you can see in classic Hello Sailor Effects style, I have refinished my enclosure. If you want to see how I take them apart and remove the circuits, please go and watch my DD-2 video, linked above. That'll show you exactly how I take it apart. Right, now a little disclaimer. If you're going to do the mod the way that I do it, you will lose functionality of having a battery, because I'm going to mount the extra components in the space where the battery would go. If that's not for you, then fair enough. You can mount them inside if you want. It's just a bit of a squeeze, and then you wouldn't get to use the huge components that I'm going to use on this one. Parts you're going to need today. You're going to need some sort of tagboard. Now you can use any style you like. I like this parallaxing. I think it's called parallaxing style. I like that. I'm going to use 3 lugs. You only really need 2, and that's going to sit in there like that. I'm also going to use a 22 NF capacitor. My buddy Dom sent me over a few of these. They're great capacitors. Get my words out. I've used them in the past. And I'm also going to use this lovely 700 NF. I mean, you're meant to only go to 470 NF on this side, but I'm going to use 700 NF Mullard Phillips tropical fish cap. And I'm going to use that for no other reason than I have it in stock. Another thing worthy of note is you are going to have to drill this enclosure. So here, as you can see, I've drilled an extra hole right there, and that is where our double pole, double throw switch is going to go. So if you want to do this mod, you have to be willing to drill a perfectly good Boss enclosure. Once you get past that initial fear, it's actually not too bad. First thing we're going to do is we're going to mount our caps to the pot. Now, for me, I'm going to remove these 2 lugs so that then I can get this cap to sit through these holes here, just because the spacing of the leads allows me to do that. And then with this cap, I'm going to do exactly the same. That's our 2 caps mounted to the board. As we can see, nice and low profile, even though they are massive capacitors. Next, we're going to move on to the wires coming off our feedback switch. So for this mod, basically, we're using a cap to go across the outside lugs of this switch. And as we can see, if we hold the pedal up here, it's this pot here, which is second along. And so it's these 2 lugs here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run 2 wires to go all from here to our switch. So they're going to be reasonably short because the switch is sitting quite potentially right there in between them. So we're just going to attach 2 reasonable length wires to that. I've shown this in the past, but to attach wires to these, I don't like to remove the pot and anything like that. Simply just bare the wire, give it a twist, and then tin it like so. Then I like to make little hooks with the end, like that. And then simply hook that hook around the leg of the pot. Give it a squeeze with your pliers. Another thing to note while you're doing this, try not to A, touch the circuit too much because of the chips on there. I'm not grounded myself, I don't know if that makes a difference. And B, don't wiggle the wires too much because sometimes they come out. And if you haven't took pictures of the pedal, I've spent hours before trying to figure out which wire goes where when you come to rebuild it. So if you give it a little squeeze around the stub of the pot coming out, as it were, I'm not sure if you can see that there, but there you go. That will kind of give you like a, oh, it's fallen off. Look at that, great video, Joe. Well done, well demonstrated. it'll give you like a solid connection, although this clearly isn't a solid connection, a solid connection to solder off. There's me saying you can get a solid connection and the thing's falling off. Get in. Life in the blue on the world according to Joe, eh? There you go. Right. So then if we just give that a quick solder, that will simply run to the switch. Once it's all in the enclosure, or once we're closer to the enclosure, we'll wire that onto the switch. But first, let's actually talk about the switch. So I'm going to use my trusty cap again. If you watch my Rangemaster video, you'll know that I love to use these caps to hold my switch while I'm doing a bit of soldering. Now, this is the fun bit. So our switch is going to be situated here, and our wires are going to run from here through this hole here where the foot switch is, up and out onto our circuit, which is going to be mounted here. So I need to attach wires, 4 of them, one for each side of the cap, that are going to run at least that long. So I tend to overestimate the wire length. I'm not very conservative on wire length that way, just because, well, no one wants to get to the point where you're about to solder to your circuit and the wire doesn't reach. Here's our 4 lengths of wire. As you can see, I've gone reasonably long. These are going to attach to each end, one to each end of each capacitor. So if I was to clip them, tin them, and then what they're going to do is I'm going to attach a wire to each of these outside lugs. Of course, the 2 inside lugs are going to attach to the wires that we previously attached to the board. It really doesn't matter which way round because the caps are non-polar. It's easier if you use non-polar caps. Hint, hint. So them 2 wires are going to attach to the 2 centre lugs. But these 4, so these 2 here are going to attach to one cap, these 2 here to the other cap. But right now, I'm just going to attach them to my switch. Now wires are attached to the switch, I'm just going to go ahead and put a bit of heat shrink on them just to keep the 2 together that are going to go to each capacitor so I don't mix them up. You don't have to do this if you haven't got heat shrink. It's just an added thing. Thought it weren't going to fit then, that would have been embarrassing, wouldn't it? And then all I then do is, I know every time I use this, I always get someone message me and say, you need to get a heat gun. Yeah, I know, I've got a heat gun. Don't worry about it. My wife bought me one many years ago. But I really like to use these lighters. I just do. This is the same as the old Stanley blade. I'm setting my ways. This is easier to get out when I was on board a ship than a big heat gun and try and find a power source for it. I just have that in my toolbox and away I go. I know that the switch is going to sit about here on my circuit. So I'm going to run my cables, potentially wires. I'm doing it again. I'm going to run my wires potentially about that long. So I'm going to snip them that long and then I'll wire this in while it's outside the enclosure so I can get to it nice and easy. And then when I fit it all in the enclosure, that should work better. I'm going to go ahead and tuck the switch underneath here. My silicone wire is really bendy and easy malleable, so it's pretty good for this sort of stuff. I'm going to tuck it under here because it's going to kind of sit like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and install all of this into our enclosure. Another thing to note is when I install it into the enclosure, I'm not going to use a lock washer. I'm not going to use any sort of spacer. I know people are going to hate me for it, but I want to keep this as low profile as possible inside the enclosure, just because I don't want it to foul a circuit. Simple as that. Here we have all of our parts now inside. Switch is fitted, and as you can see, I've got my 2 sets of wires coming past the switch, which is now wired back up. If you want to see me do that again, the BD-2 video shows me doing that, or the DS-1 video, pretty much I think it shows me doing how you rewire these switches up. Pretty simple. So we've got our 2 capacitor connections, and we're going to attach our board in here. Now normally I use a steel reinforced epoxy resin, the good old JB Weld. I've joked about that in the past to put this down, but I'm not going to for this one. I know it sounds stupid. I'm just going to put foam pads down because if anyone wants to reverse this mod and put a battery back in, they will be able to do so. If I JB weld it, it's going to be more difficult. And somehow I don't think it's going to get much of a beating. All we do now is run each set of wires to each capacitor. So I'm going to use this set of wires for this capacitor and this set of wires for that capacitor. And they just go literally either end, attached to them lugs. I mean, you can make it as pretty as you want. There's our circuit now fully wired up. We've got our 2 sets of wires going to either end of our caps. and that'll give us in the center position our normal digital delay. One side will give us just a slight bit of analog trail off, and then the other way it will give us a massive amount of analog trail off, and we should have 3 extra settings to our DD-3. Just before we get to the sound sample that I know everyone's dying to hear, just a thought. With the foot pad, would you guys prefer to see something like a Hello Sailor sticker, maybe the point and gun sticker or something like that, or would you prefer to see, putting it upside down there, the Boss foot pad go back on?